this video we're going to go over authorization, which are controls that are incorporated by the DBMS to restrict data access or certain actions that certain users can perform. And we've actually talked about this a little bit when we talked about granting users certain privileges as well as views. So for example, where we can apply to the salesperson privileges, we can give him access to everything on the customer table except for delete. We can give him insert and select privileges on the order table. What we want to do is make sure that we map out what all these user privileges could be, and we are going to apply the rule of least privilege, meaning that we don't want to give them more privileges than they absolutely need to accomplish their particular job. So another thing is to grant execute privileges on procedures. So those procedures that we've already talked about, if we can have all the users go through procedures rather than be able to directly interact with the database, then it's going to be a much better way for us to have our database set up. So here's an example of that authorization matrix we were talking about, where we can have all the different subjects, then we have all the different objects. Those would be like the tables, the views, the triggers, the procedures, etc. What type of actions that particular subject can execute on that particular object, any limits that they can do. For example, the sales department can only work with credit limits underneath $5,000. So you're going to basically identify all the different things that people need access to and what are the restrictions that are going to be built into your database, and then you'll actually go ahead and implement those into your database. So there's a variety of ways to restrict data access. The first one is row level access. This is similar to what we've talked previously, where we're going to do views. Rather than actually grant the user access to a specific table, we're going to grant them access to a view. This view will limit the amount of information that the user will be able to see. So for example, if we want to query from employees and inside the employee table we actually have social security numbers, we could have a view just retrieved all the information that we want regarding the employees except for the social security number, so that we can keep that well protected. So rather than updating the products table, the user would then be able to update the view or insert into the view or interact with the view rather than having direct access to the table. So one thing that you may want to do with an authorization is develop this CRUD report, which basically stands for create, read, update, and delete. In this CRUD report or CRUD matrix, we can see the forms and the access that these forms are going to have with our table data. So for example, we have the customer, order, employee, and product form. The customer form would allow me to only create, read, update, and delete the customer information, whereas the order form would allow me to read the customer information and employee information, but create, read, update, delete both the orders and the order line information, and just read and update the product information. The employee form would allow me to do all that with the employee, and the product form would allow me to do all that with the product. So this CRUD matrix is a useful tool to help us identify not just the user privileges, but also the application privileges and what access it will have with our database.